Hello and welcome to DDOCast episode 635, recorded live on Saturday, April 10th. I'm your host, Patrick. With me this week, we have coming back to show Arkat.
Hey, PJ, you sounded like you didn't really know which episode this was.
That was less that and more me doing moving the four different things at the same time at the beginning of the show.
Okay.
Although I will say I did actually tweet out initially that this was episode 365.
Oh,
Yeah,
gonna go back
numbers.
in time.
We also have Epicsoul coming back.
It's nice to be back.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Sorry for the delay. We needed to wait a little bit to give Epic some time to shelter in place for tornado reasons. So that's why we're starting a little bit late. And we're glad everything's fine and he's here. And we get to have some fun. I like having fun. This week's screenshot. Ganilrez conducts a photo shoot in the 12 prior to reincarnating in the 504th screenshot of the week. It is a slick shot. It's kind of like the action pose. Nice one. The angle of the staff very nearly matches the angle of that lightning, which is pretty damn cool.
That's a nice little detail.
Yeah, that was well done, sir. Great shot. We like to talk about Dungeons & Dragons online nearly every weekend. You can catch us through Twitch, YouTube, DDO forums, iTunes, or from our website at DDOcast.com. DDOcast is hosted by Cyber Ears, the awesome podcast hosting network, and shows are usually available within a few days of recording. The next show will probably be next weekend, and you can stay updated by following us on our social media pages or website, DDOcast.com, with our calendar. On the podcast this week, hey, we had some fun. If you're listening to this live, we had some fun this morning. We recorded live and asked the devs about Update 49. So we have Cocomajobo and Lynnabel Cordovan talking about the bow changes and the server performance or the game performance changes, which we'll talk about our experiences here as well.
Hey, PJ, I just wanted to ask you a real quick question. Have you ever gotten the impression that the reason why Cordovan is there is to sort of like babysit and make sure the devs don't say anything that they shouldn't say or that the SSG is not ready for them to say?
Generally no, because he's not usually the one who determines it. I think he comes on one because he's kind of the customer facing person.
Sure.
Also his relationship with I think he just likes being on the show too. He is the person who started DDOcast way back when.
Sure.
So, but I think it's also like a coordination thing, right? So there's, he and I have a very open line of communication, just because he's the one that I communicate with to make that happen. So,
sure.
But no, he's not. They know what they can talk about and what they can't talk about, and I think if anything, he's probably the one that is more likely to accidentally say something he's not supposed to.
Gotcha.
But no, it's not like that. Anyways, let's we'll get into game news here. There's a little bit that we're gonna kind of try to cruise through and kind of condense a little bit. But first, there's now an opt-in or opt-out in the email newsletters. Jerry did talk about that a little bit, so we'll he'll kind of give some more of the details. But basically, it's one, they're gonna like actually be doing a newsletter more frequently, and two, you actually now have the ability to opt in and opt out through your My Account page. So that's now an option. We also had
one thing that you need to be aware of is that if you go to your My Account page there, you can opt in or opt out for both DDO and Latro newsletters.
Yes. Good point.
So everybody go there and opt out if you do not want to hear about Latro stuff. And likewise, if you're a Latro person and don't want to hear about DDO stuff, opt out of the DDO emails.
Right. Update 48.5.1 dropped this week. And pretty small patch. The Mimic Festival vendor is now available on the Hardcore League server. However, the option to apply Mimic Repellent is not available.
Well, duh.
You're stuck with the Mimics. Some NPC text has been corrected. I'm assuming that has to do. That's the hardcore vendor saying things that they're not supposed to, or saying incorrect things. The Roman numeral 4 has been removed from the reward mount due to a mirroring issue.
Yeah, on the other side, it looked like a 6.
Yep. Although I guess this means that it's off of both sides, which is a little weird.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they took it off.
That's unfortunate. Although I don't think the 3 or the 2 one has it. I don't think they have numerals.
Oh, on the mounts? No, I don't think so
Yeah, I
either.
don't think so.
Well, even if they did, though, that wouldn't be an issue because
Yeah.
it would mirror the same on the other side.
True.
That's one of those things. It's like, oh, that's kind of neat. So that's how they do this. Oops. Electric floors in some quests, like Spies in the House, now do less damage. Insert my normal, or my complaint about how little damage the electric floor does in Master Artificer.
Was that affected?
I don't know. It didn't feel like it was doing less
No,
today.
it
I mean, we
didn't.
just ran it today. It wasn't.
Yeah.
It didn't feel like it was any different.
Yeah.
It's some of the floors. So Spies in the House does feel like it does a
Yes,
fair
it
amount of
does.
damage. So
It does a ton of damage, yeah.
Alchemical Stone no longer uses incorrect item scaling and is now bound to character like other veteran status items. I have this is apparently a bad, like a big nerf thing or something. Like
Yes.
It's an orb that you get as a starter. It's like a level 1 starter piece of equipment,
right.
and the what do you call it? It had 66 spell. Is it
It was
spell
potency.
power?
It was just potency.
Potency. Thank you. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So if you were like a level 1 wizard or something, it did a lot more damage if you had that.
Then it should be.
Now it has 16 potency.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, but probably appropriate. And then the last one is minor Slayer count boost no longer count down while in dungeons. That's good. Things should not count down when they're minor Slayer count boosts are not doing you a whole lot of good.
Exactly.
That's the one that's like 25%, I think.
Yeah, you have to kill like 4 things to get an extra kill.
Yeah. Pro tip: don't buy those.
No.
If you're gonna spend money on them, get the bigger ones. Like those are.
Get the major ones. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, I have actually started doing, like, while I'm doing heroic class, I've started drinking the medium ones.
Mm-hmm.
To use them. You can get a little bit of XP while you're running through some of those Slayer zones. But it's really just an excuse to use them. Like, I'm not actively doing Slayers.
Because they're taking up space in your inventory.
Yes, that. The reason why I'm using that one specifically is because I only had like 10 of them.
Right.
So they're easier to get rid of.
Got
Update 49 had its second preview. And this is the thing we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about. There was a couple of new release notes. Vistani Knife Fighter Rapid Shot and Rapid Throw now have their double strike bonus properly typed as Morale. Uncanny Dodge feats no longer cause a pause and auto attack. Yay! I like that. I gotta say, like, really quick aside, talking about hardcore, Uncanny Dodge is one of those things that I think gets overlooked a lot more than it should, especially for hardcore. If you're a character that gets Uncanny Dodge, put that on your hotbar.
Right, and use it.
Yeah, frequently. Also, offhand versatility now functions with orbs. I know some people were happy with that. Epic, were you playing with single weapon fighting recently?
Yeah, I've played around with it.
Yeah.
And if I believe it's also being changed or has been changed to now just be a 5-second buff and all of your spells crit.
That sounds
within
right.
5 seconds. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That's a nice change too over what it was before.
Celestial Tutelage in ASMR now works to prereq for Feydark Illusionist. That's fun. I might actually use that on hardcore when that comes out, because I currently have I might kind of like dabble in hardcore, I think, and I made a ASMR paladin that, Feydark Illusionist might be if I can squeeze out some action points, might be a nice little splash in. Shieldbreaker now provides its Sunder bonuses. Fey Twisted raid items are now purchasable with raid runes. They're purchasable. It's 2,500 raid runes. For reference, the norm or the standard is 1,250, so it's double that. Which I'm okay with. It doesn't really bother me, although I'm not sure if Arkat is. I think you really want to put that in there.
Yeah, that was me. It would have been, it would have made more sense if you had, in the, go to the turn-in window, right? And you could turn in your runes. But what if, getting the Fate Twisted version meant that you had to put in the non-Fate Twisted version, plus 1,250 runes to get the Fate Twisted version. I mean, it's still. I mean, if you don't have, either the Fate Twisted version or the non-Fate Twisted version, it's still going to cost you 2,500 runes to get the
Right.
Fate Twisted version. But at least, if you get it, in a chest and you don't really need it, it saves you from having to get a bunch of runes. I mean, it would have made more. There was a very similitude there, because this isn't the only thing that would have required the original version plus something to get the upgraded version, right? Or the alternate version. So it would have made. I just think it would have been made more sense to do that.
Not all of the Fate Twisted items have a regular version, though. For instance, there's no rapier for just regular item.
Okay.
Well, but it's not the Fate Twisted part is that it's a different type of item, right?
Yes.
So although I don't remember which ones are which, because like the axes are Fate Twisted
the
off of
axe
the
and great axe.
Yeah, are Fate Twisted off of the axe. What is it? Scimitar.
Hand axe.
Hand.
Then there's also the dwarven axe too.
That's what it is. Yeah, the hand axe Fate twists into the great axe and the dwarven axe.
Yes.
It's I agree. Like flavor wise, it definitely would be kind of more interesting, kind of fun. I kind of wonder if they're not doing that specifically so that they don't have to tie those items into the crafting to reduce the into the raid crafting to reduce the amount of load that has to hold on to.
There's also assuming that you get the base item, right? So what if you what if you don't get the base item and
then it's still just 1,200.
It'll still be 2,500 runes.
Right.
Oh, you're saying give the option to do it.
Yeah, give the option.
Because then you would just buy the regular one and then buy the upgraded one.
Sure. Right. I mean, it doesn't bother me personally, simply because you're getting 2 chests as opposed to 1. But
I'll be honest. Even if it was 1, even if you weren't, I'd still would be fine with me. Like it's running the raid. At least from my experience, I've seen 1 Fate Twisted raid chest in the number of times that I've run it. So running the raid 20 times is still, or 40 times is still probably more likely than getting that item anyways. So I don't like the cost increase doesn't really bother me in any way, shape, or form. And I again say like I would love if they would add the sentient gem from Strahd to that raid rune list, and there's some pets in a couple raids. It'd be nice to see in those raid. Although I don't think they have raid runes yet, but yeah. The named loot from Lord's March Plaza quests have been slightly updated to match modern scaling effect standards. They have not been redesigned, but have instead had effects that were basic static stat boost moved to the modern scaling effects of Caneth crafting. So, which is an increase across the board. Because they're level 13, I think, items, 10 or 13, somewhere in that range.
I think they're 12. Most of them.
The basic ones are 10, but when you upgrade them, it boosts them to like 12 or 13.
The stat on at least the one that I can think of off the top of my head is only 5, so this should bring it up to like 6 or 7, I think. So.
I checked them out. They look nice. It's a good change.
Yeah, I mean, they could really just go through and do that with all the loot, right? Like just put it on the newer scaling.
The new normalization thing. Yeah.
Do a lot of good. Which I think is kind of something that Lynnabel's been working on the side.
I think so too. Yeah.
You can now break the root walls in combating corruption with ranged attacks. Yay. Mounts should no longer be summonable in quests. They weren't before. What would happen is you could go through the mounting up process, but then it would immediately dismount you.
Right.
But you can't do that anymore, or you won't be able to. And they did some appearance fixes on some NPCs. They did release the new quest, the 4th quest. I know who done it. I just like
fantastic.
The title. Yeah,
it's a great quest.
Does it have a beholder in it or something? Is that why they spell
no,
I with EYE?
It's sort of like a mystery type quest. There's like 4 or 5 possible culprits who stole one of the artifacts, and you just spend your time trying to figure out who did it. So
I think you had described it to me as like a Clue style quest.
Yes. Yeah. And you can, if you want to accuse somebody without having all the clues, you can go down the list of potential suspects until you get to the right one. Or if you want to spend your time doing the optionals, you can actually figure out who did it or who done it, rather.
Did you do the other ones too?
I did, yes. A few of them I did not rerun this go around, and I don't think it's fair since they weren't really finished the first preview. But there's another one, I don't remember the name of it, that was also really good. That's got like the new puzzle from DD in it, and it's just a good quest.
Oh, nice. There was quote new loot. The new loot stuff was just a couple new artifacts were in the loot list. We talked about the Fate Twisted stuff from Dryad, Lord's March items. Also, Fear Eater was fixed, which is an augment from the Dryad and the Demigod, which is the what's the effect called? It's like a phantasmal killer effect.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Sovereign Nightmares.
Yeah. So that will be fixed. Bow changes, some updates to this. They made some changes to the human male, the humans and the tieflings to make them visually stand straighter while firing a bow. They plan to bring this straighter posture to all characters before live release. They also tweaked a bunch of the feats. So point blank shot will now give you +1 critical threat range. Combat archery will give you +1 critical multiplier. That's all with longbows and short bows. Their mini shot. So they preview 1. They changed it to an active attack. What they're doing this time is, I think the attack is basically the same. It gives you more double shot now, which is 1.5 times your base attack bonus. But the feat now has 3 charges, which you regain every 12 seconds. So the idea here is what they were trying to do is kind of simulate more of a bursting capability. So if you let it charge up to 3, you can fire them in quick succession, and then wait for it to come back instead of having a full 12-second cooldown. I'm not sure what the cooldown is on it now.
It's
like
2
2
seconds.
minutes.
It's 2. Oh, now on live. Sorry.
On live, it's 2 minutes.
No, I was saying like this on the preview.
Oh, the previous.
The new.
On preview, it was 12. It was 12 seconds, but you could only hit it once every 12 seconds. This way, you have the option of just hitting it 3 times and waiting 12 seconds, or having it regenerate 1 or it. Yeah.
It plays much better,
Yes.
from my experience.
Yeah, so if you're kind of trying to think of an analog of what this might feel like, it'd be similar to the Favored Soul wings. You have a certain number of charges that regenerate over time, and if you spam them, you'll run out. But if you just use them occasionally, you should have no problem keeping them. So.
Right.
Rapid Shot is now also range power 1.5 times your base attack bonus. So between that and Mini Shot, you should get another whatever your base attack bonus is to your range power. Which seems like a lot, but Cool.
No, it's so normal. So what it was in preview one, it was 1 times your base
Right.
attack bonus.
It's
So
increasing.
25, right? It would be 25 range power, but with this it's 37. So so you get an extra 12 range power through
For
both
each of the feats.
double shot, through your many shot and also your rapid shot. So it's like an extra really 24, 25
Yeah,
range
the
power, which
the
is
thing that's
nice.
kind of weird for me is that it feels like you get higher range power than melee power, but maybe that's not accurate. It just seems like
You mean in
those.
general?
Yeah.
No, I mean it's so the
Well, with
archer's
these
focus
feats.
really helps, but there's some melee that can get pretty high as well
Sure.
in melee cost.
Deepwood Stalkers, heavy draws, critical multipliers should now stay on the player more consistently. Helpful.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. The Kotzi ranged Exalted Smite should now list its proper critical bonuses. And for the preview, this is only on the preview. The point blank shot now grants its +1 critical threat range with bows. This means the loss of this threat range can easily be replaced in heroics and epics. Oh, I know what this is. So point blank shot now adds the critical threat range. And what they're doing here is there was a whole list of bows, or maybe like 7 or 8 bows, that had kind of artificially been propped up by giving them larger threat profiles.
Right.
They reduced those down to a non-propped up
Well, it
threat
was still
profile.
propped up, but it wasn't propped up as much. So
Well, it was they're better profiles, but they're not so
Right.
much better because of how in bad a state that bows were
That's
in.
right. Yep.
What this change is actually doing, which we already mentioned the change, but it's making that a feat that will apply to all bows to help kind of get the numbers in the right place. So, which is kind of neat. I think Arkat, I know you were doing some kind of dry calculations.
Yeah.
What did you end up with for the critical profile? Do you remember?
So critical profile, I got to 17 to 18 times 6 and 19 to 20 times 9, which was pretty nice. It was
Is that with a
just
monk?
What's that?
Is that with monk or no?
No, it was not with monk. It was with a combination of 12 ranger and 5 barbarian, and the remaining 3 levels could be anything you wanted, but it was the 12 ranger, 5 barbarian that was allowing me to get to that
Right.
crit profile.
I think there was a little bit of debate in that thread. Someone pointed out that critical profile may not be worth splashing as opposed to staying as a pure ranger too.
Yeah.
But
I think that was Ying.
Yeah, I think that's right.
That out.
Yeah, I mean, talking competitively, not necessarily whether bows will be viable in a better place, but comparing it to top-end ranged builds on live, bows are in a better place. They're really close. If they decide to fix the attack speed that was on Lamania.
Are you talking about the animation?
Yeah, so they're supposed to be getting 86 attack per minute, and most races were getting 76, and some were even getting 67, and a few were getting close to 100. But we'll see where it lands. If they land at that 86 number, some bow builds will be pretty competitive at in-game.
It'd be great. I love it when more builds become competitive.
Another change too, and Stillstar has mentioned, is there will be additional ways to increase your BAB in the future, which will really help with that as well.
Which I think he said will be in the Epic Destiny Pass. There's going to be more. It sounds like they're going to make it easier to increase that later, which would be great. Let's see. Game performance. So this was the new thing with Update 49. And I am not going to read all of this because it gets pretty crunchy. But we'll link to it in the show notes if you want to go read it. I will warn you, I think it took me about 3 times through before it started making, some of the parts started making sense. We did cover this with the devs, so they'll kind of give you a more a summarized version verbally as part of the show as well. But we'll give some of the highlights, and then we're also going to talk. Arkat Epic and I and our members of our guild, we were on Lamania on Wednesday and did Vision of Destruction and Killing Time. They kind of the devs asked for people to come over to Lamania and try out some ratings specifically to see if how well these performances changes did. So we'll give you kind of our firsthand early return experience on that. So here's some of the write-up. In Update 49, they're making significant changes to how melee and missile combat is calculated to address long-term community and development team concerns about game performance. So before this change, simulations of raid group proccing on-hit effects used approximately 99.965% processing per instance and produce an effects queue, which causes combat processing lag for all players in the same server while the queue is processed. After this change...
Approximately. That number is approximate.
Yes. Although it is... it being 99.965 basically sounds like almost all of it.
Yeah.
After this change, simulations of raid group was approximately 50% of that available processing, which is well within the green zone of server frames per second, and rarely, if ever, hits an effects queue. The important thing they want to note here is when they're talking about a server here, it's not a world in terms of like Galanda or Solana or Wayfinder, but the actual machines that process DDO and share the load of each instance between them. This also will alleviate a source of client lag, which being the floaty text queue. So if you play with the floaty text off to alleviate client strain, this will prevent that strain by removing pressure from that queue.
So you can turn it back on again and see all those cool numbers.
So one of the most frequent causes of lag is happening right now is when an effects queue forms. This means that players have applied enough on-hit effects to a monster, and the game has reached a buffer and has to clear its queue order to continue processing new information. And they did also, see if I can find that. This is also something that it's not just one monster necessarily. So they were finding that this actually didn't actually matter if everyone was attacking the same monster or if everyone was attacking 4 or 5 different monsters. It was still just the problem here is the number of effects the server is being asked to process was backlogging. So here are some specific changes. Double strike and double shot, which for brevity they will call a multi-hit, will no longer apply a full subsequent, quote, attack as part of your attack chain. Instead, the game will instead multiply the base amount of damage dealt by the amount of multi-hits generated. So if you deal 100 damage on your first hit, when you get the double strike or multi-strike, it will be 200 or 300 damage. The multiplying depends on how many, quote, hits you would get. When a multi-hit happens, you'll see an icon of 2 swords next to your damage in the floaty text, similar to how point-blank shot provides the feedback. I'm just going to pause and say that's a really cool, I like that a lot. That feedback is great. I kind of want to see more of that, actually. Abilities that apply additional range projectiles, like Shuriken Expertise, Advanced Ninja Training, no longer apply multiple hits or projectiles. Instead, they act as additional chances to multi-hit, just like Double Shot. Effects that trigger on hit will also have their damage multiplied comparatively. It means if you deal 10 law damage in each hit, on a double strike, it will deal 20. Repeating crossbows and dual crossbow styles still fire their 3 or 2 full projectiles and are still affected by their double shot penalties, respectively. They talked about that a little bit, but the short version is that they still want those combat styles to feel like those combat styles. It also differentiates them from other things a little bit as well. And that actually plays into something we'll talk about in a minute. A player's 100% effective double strike cap still applies to the system. Offhand strikes will still be a separate, quote, hit. That's important. We'll come back to that. And will roll their own damage from their own weapon and can still double strike. However, they have removed the stat offhand double strike from the game. Your offhand double strike now double strikes at 50% of the double strike of your main hand. So if you have a 50% chance to produce offhand strike and 100% double strike, your offhand will hit 50% of the time for 50% double strike. Abilities and enhancements that used to provide offhand double strike no longer do so. They did mention briefly in the interview that they are looking to add something back into the places where that is, but this is not a common thing, offhand double strike.
Right.
So that
could be that's a buff. I mean, that could be generally a buff because not many people have a lot of offhand double strike, mods on their equipment. So
right.
For most 2-weapon fighting builds, yes. For Rangers, it's probably going to be a little bit of a nerf.
But they did talk about how Lynnabel did mention that they want to add something back into those abilities to kind of like they recognize they're taking something out of Tempest, but they're looking to put something back in as well. So shields can still not double strike. Strike through attacks still proc their own double strike roll individually per target struck. The main reason behind these changes is they were letting repeaters and offhand skills still proc rather than fully condensing, is they want to keep the damage numbers appropriate to the amount of animations that a player actually produces. It's also, I think one of the things they kind of mentioned is it's still, it adds a little bit of flavor to those as well, and having those 2 hits still allows you to get those multiple hit effects. One of the major effects of this change is that damage will be spikier across the board. The multi-hit calculation takes the original roll into account when determining damage, which means you'll see much higher highs and much lower lows. Attacks that critical will multiply that increased damage, so you'll see much higher numbers on those attacks. Attacks that miss will deal no damage as before, but will, rather than a multi-hit giving a chance for a second strike to deal damage, they will still deal no damage.
So yeah, it's really feast or famine.
Yep.
Is this a good part? Is this a good place to talk about the sneak attack damage not being multiplied?
Let me. Yes, let's talk. We'll stop there and we'll kind of go back to some of this.
Okay.
I will. You were mentioning the sneak attack. There was sneak attack, and there was I think something else too that was not correctly being multiplied. And Lynnabel has already fixed for the next preview.
Right.
So that was something that wasn't happening.
Then there's the non-damaging
yes
stuff.
That's kind of the big elephant with this.
Yeah.
So the shorter kind of summary version of what's going on here is you don't get a double strike, double shot, don't produce an extra, quote, hit, which means anything that procs on hit will hit fewer times. If that effect is a damage number, so anything you would see in the floating numbers, it's being multiplied, which includes things that reflect back on you. So that includes the healing stuff from vampirism, and key generation also applies to that. So any numbery stuff gets multiplied by that double strike. So those numbers should actually end up maybe slightly better than what we're used to. And the reason I say that is because specifically with something that has, say, damage reduction, if you're not breaking through the damage reduction, you will actually experience less damage reduction on your attack, so they'll do more damage. Because it's being lumped, instead of having 2 attacks at 100 that take 30 damage reduction, you're going to get 1 attack at 200 that takes 30 damage reduction. So there's a little bit of a buff there. the part where that you're kind of alluding to is there's a pretty significant nerf here in non-damage effects don't have anything to scale.
Right.
So you'll just get fewer hits with them. So this would be stuns, trips, like tactical things.
Nerve Venom.
Nerve Venom, I know, is a big one that people are talking about.
Nerve Venom's got a real big one for me.
Well, and especially when you think about the range is going to feel this effect a lot more, I think, right? Because melee, your double strike was capped, so your main hand could only ever hit twice. Right. And you could also have your offhand, which could hit 2 more times. So the most you could ever get was 4. It is important to note that the offhand will still hit a second time. So if you are a 2-weapon fighter or an unarmed monk using 2-weapon fighting style, but with unarmed as well, you're still getting 2 attacks. But that is still potentially like a stun. This is the place that I'm kind of most concerned about it. Like, I like playing a monk. And one of the things I really like about that is when I throw a stun attack, it can hit up to 4 times between my main hand, my offhand, and the double strikes. That's going to be down to 2 from 4, so it's a 50% less effectiveness. And you guys probably can name the, but range, you can get more projectiles because there's no cap to double shot.
Right.
Well, there is a cap. There's no cap to double shot, but you can't go over 5 projectiles. That's 5. I think it's 5.
Okay.
And yeah, so I mean, depending on what effect we're talking about, I don't think it's as bad of a nerf as some other people do, which is fine. I think some of the things like Nerve Venom is a little overpowered on live at the moment, anyways, for ranged. But it's been like this for years, so I understand it's going to change a lot of builds and a lot of like you were mentioning stuns. It's going to change that play style a lot. Even Dire Charge, proccing twice with the double strike. It just, I think people will get used to the system though once the change hits, and will adjust to it as well. I'm happy to hear though that like crossbow repeaters, that'll even create a niche for them though, because it's still 3 full projectiles,
right,
as opposed to being rolled into 1.
Yeah, and there's going to be some, not to take too much of the thunder out of the Ask the Devs portion, but there's a little bit of talk about how that leaves some interesting options for them to have more of maybe a debuff niche, right? Because their attacks will proc effects more frequently because they will feel they're losing less because they already have a 67% penalty to double strike.
Yeah.
Already.
Double shot.
Your double shot. Yeah. So they're already getting less effect from that to begin with, but they're not losing their 3 shots. So you might see that being a really a benefit if they're, say, using a dust repeating crossbow or something like that.
Yeah, and talking about buff, consider you're a 2-handed fighter running Fury, and that adrenaline now is going to be a lot chunkier than what it was before, since you're getting both numbers rolled into that multiplier instead of just the 1.
A little bit. Adrenaline's changing a little bit, but I'll save that for the Ask the Devs portion.
Oh man.
Uh-oh.
A little bit.
This doesn't sound good.
I think it'll be okay.
Okay. I'll wait and listen, but you piqued my interest.
Apparently, some people were hitting like 1 million damage.
Is it just adrenaline?
188,000 screenshot. Yeah.
Is it just adrenaline, or is it Hunt's End as well?
Yes, but it's not in the same. It doesn't. I think it's not going to be changed in the same way. But it's in the Ask Devs portion. I'll leave it there. Mostly because I don't want to say the wrong thing.
Okay. Stay tuned.
Yes. So these changes will eliminate the floaty text queue in practice as well. Players who are used to seeing damage numbers scroll by in a delay will now see the system replaced with numbers that are more current. This will make DPS easier to estimate from a series of hits, and there will simply be fewer numbers to add up and adjust. There's something else I was going to mention, and I just lost it. That's unfortunate. Let's see. What this means in practice is that I remember what it was. Going back to the non-damage effects procs. There were a lot of questions like, hey, well, can you increase the chance that those have to apply and stuff like that, specifically like nerve venom. And the devs pretty concretely said, no, that's counterproductive because the goal is to reduce the number of effects. So if they reduce the number of effects and then artificially add them back in, you end up in the same problem with the effects queue.
Yeah, so for example, nerve venom is 7% chance to proc for each shot.
Yep.
So what if let's say my dagger thrower gets gets 4 throws in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's 4 7% chances. So
right.
So if you like increase the percent chance, let's say to 10%.
Yeah, you're talking about doing it as an intermediate number as opposed to going back to it.
It's still fewer. It's still a lesser chance than 4 times 7. You get maybe 10% chance or 14% chance as opposed to 4 times 7. So yeah, sure. You increase it more than just doing the one time at 7%, but it's still less than the 4 times 7. So I guess it's slightly more, but it's still a lot less than what it was. So
true, and we may see that. I don't think that they said it explicitly anywhere, but I kind of got the sense that their starting place is no, we're gonna put these changes out and see where it lands.
Right.
There might be some room to,
and then they can buff it later.
Possibly, yeah.
Maybe.
I think a change like that, the nerve venom would be fine. I do think it's overpowered as it is on live, but 10% would be fine. However, going through that with every ability, it would be.
Which was something else that they mentioned, I believe, as well. That makes that a little trickier.
It does.
So, what this means in practice, no matter how many projectiles a shuriken thrower uses or dual crossbow player fires, the maximum rate of on-hit effects is now directly linked to your attack speed, and is therefore significantly reduced. This has the potential to greatly reduce the amount of actual, quote, attacks in DDO without greatly disrupting player behavior. I feel like without greatly disrupting player behaviors is generously glossing over the non-damage,
right there. Yeah,
the non-damage
that's
effects.
Pollyanna right there, and and it's honestly that pisses me off. It's very patronizing.
Sure.
Honestly, it's like, oh well, it'll feel okay instead of actually being okay.
Sure.
That's baloney.
The end result of this change should be improved gameplay on the performance end. Further, the numbers you see while dealing damage will more accurately reflect what's happening in the moment, and you should be able to make calculations more quickly. And then they said, please come over to Lemania and give it a shot, which we did. So I wanted to give some space to that. Like I said, we ran Killing Time and Vision Destruction. What'd you guys think about the changes? Understanding that this was we did these once on Lemania server. This was not on live.
You go first, Arkat.
Okay, so I noticed it. I actually thought, I liked, one time I had like a 150,000 point, throw on my thrower, which was nice. Seeing that big giant number,
it's exciting, isn't it?
Well, yeah, but then fully, against a fully buffed opponent, I can see, 40 to 50,000 on a single throw. So you multiply that by 4, you're looking at 160 to 200,000. So I didn't see that, what do you call it, on Wednesday night, but that could have just been, that we didn't have our monk who does the Jade Strike. So we're missing an extra 25%. So it's, it's the 160 to 200,000 points on a throw is a fully debuffed throw. So maybe that's not really wasn't really a fair comparison. But what I did notice is the lack of the extra sneak damage, because my ranger has a bunch of sneak damage, not as much as
Sure.
a rogue would have, but it was noticeable. I did notice that it, the lesser amount of damage, but that, having said that, you know what Lynnabel said later was that the sneak damage multiplying has been fixed. And I guess maybe I'm prejudging a little harshly.
What do you think about the performance?
Performance seemed to be better. I still saw Jerry flying around, just staying up there in the air, like he was still lagging a little bit. So
Although I will mention in KT I think he permanently turned on flying on his
oh,
character.
okay, well then
He
maybe,
did.
okay, there you go. All right, well, I didn't know and wasn't aware that he could do that. So okay.
Yeah.
I think I saw him fall off the island once, and he magically made it back up there. So first, I'll say, listening to PJ, enjoy those 150k crits while they last, because we might see the end of Adrenaline. I'm just kidding. But on the performance changes, I think it's hard to ask players to judge performance because there's so many things that can cause lag.
Yes.
So they might go into the raid thinking, oh, well, this is going to fix everything and there will be no hitching. And that's not the case. They are looking at one particular type of lag that I know we as a guild have definitely experienced, which is where we're applying too many type of effects. And I can think of many times where we've self-mitigated that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can say personally, just from the 2 raids that we did run, I think that particular type of lag is better. We still had lag, but I don't think it was related to the effects lag.
And we're like, especially when we start talking about like pushing the raid difficulty, there's a real concerted effort to coordinate, particularly like the debuffing effects. So in that way, our guild has a tendency to really maximize the the amount of effects that we can apply, right? Because a lot of them don't stack on top of each other.
Yep. And yeah, we have a lot of effects going at once.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's planned, and haste boosts and all sorts of things that many times boss fights have just lagged out from the system having to catch up. And I think that is better. I think the lag we experienced was spawn lag or possibly like visual effects lag, but I don't think it was related to the system, the queue, as they call it.
The effects queue, yeah.
I was not playing a DPS character. I was healing the raid, so it's harder for me to speak to the damage. But I felt like we were moving through the raids as fast, if not maybe a little faster than normal. And it's I'm not sure if that's because the damage is still really kind of the same, maybe slightly better, or if it's we weren't losing damage to lag and the effects queue backlogging. But I did not feel like those raids took any longer to do.
I think on the damage perspective, you'll see a slight damage increase due to certain builds getting an increase. All things that said, I don't know the changes in the next build and some of the ones you just talked about. So that might not be the case next time, but in that preview, there were a few people that were getting a damage increase.
Sure. But I'm pretty optimistic about the changes. I think that we will see a pretty decent performance increase, particularly from a rating perspective. And it's important to note too, right? Like this is something that's radiating. So the effects queue processing gets backed up partly, because in raids you have a tendency to be in these moments where you're really just standing at a boss and just wailing on him.
Mm-hmm.
But that is affecting the server is not just processing the effects from that group, but across multiple instances on the server. So it sounds like that this is degrading performance across a lot of people's experience. So I think that the effects part will be really successful. I'm concerned about the non-damage on hit and how that's going to feel. Although I will say that I personally am less concerned where I started, because once I recognized that offhand attacks were still getting a second hit and chance to proc that stuff.
It's still better.
Yeah. But I think overall, like, from a performance issue, like, I think we're gonna be in a happier place.
Yeah,
and
some
have
of
to
the
relearn
changes,
what the numbers mean, but
so like Arkat mentioning Nerve Venom, that I understand. Like, you've been playing a certain build, and this is something you're used to.
Well, yeah, I'm used to it, but it's also a way for me to do crowd control. I mean, ranged tunes, since they totally, you know, I guess they totally nerfed, for lack of a better word,
the inquisitive
improved
nerfs.
precise shot.
Yep.
That was a way for me to do some crowd control, and that's going to hurt, my ability to do any sort of crowd control. So,
I have a
it
question
wasn't
on this.
damage. It was a way for me to help the rest of the people in the raid or the party. That's going to hurt.
Do you think that
Right.
there's an interesting kind of thing here in that a repeater or a dual crossbow user using Nerve Venom will getting more procs of
Well, I
Nerve?
thought about that,
Do you
and
think that will be
that's interesting.
okay?
I'll have to think about, started playing my artificer or my what do you call it, the guy, the double crossbow guy, whatever they are,
Inquisitive.
inquisitive.
Yeah.
I have to think about start playing them instead now.
And I'm not. So from my perspective, I think getting 4 or 5 projectiles that have a 7% chance to CC most mobs in the game, no fail. To me, that's a little OP. That's a little overpowered, so I don't mind the change. But I am glad, like I said, that repeaters get to keep that portion of it, because even like I used to, for fun, would play Artie with Executioner Shot, and you could get 3, 4, possibly up to 6 chances to 35% chance to just instantly kill a line of mobs, and that was fun. And I'm glad that they're letting repeaters keep that.
The differentiation there is kind of intriguing. Right, so that's update 49. We'll move on to some of the other stuff and kind of cruise through it. Bonus days. The Festival of the Traveler is here through April 18th, and there was not much rejoicing. Jerry did say that responded to they know the Festival of the Traveler rewards are outdated. Hopefully someday they'll get them updated. The return of this event is more about bringing it back for the first time in a long time. I think I saw someone say that it's been 7 years.
Yeah, and you know what? Somebody posted a link to a post that happened in like 2019, and it sounded like from that post that was linked to that it actually happened like 2 years ago. I don't remember.
Yeah, it's
That's
been
one of
a
those
while.
ones where I don't pay attention. I don't pay
Yeah.
attention to that event at all.
Yeah.
So it could have been 2 years ago. It could have been 7 years ago, for all I'm concerned.
The store news: Honor Your Guild sale, 20% off of Astral Shards, Guild Renown Elixirs, and 50% off of charters and airship beacons through April 15th. The coupon code is 3 tokens of the Traveler, with the coupon code Spring Eggs. This would be a lot more fun if they also gave us one of the blessings to use.
Yeah.
In as a freebie, that would like actually make it kind of interesting. It would also give it kind of a reason to run. I think that's the thing for me is like, okay, we're doing it. Can we just like give us one blessing thing as a freebie to go
Give
with
me
it?
some sort of real incentive to actually run it.
Yeah. If you have no idea what we're talking about, so it's like this little Easter egg hunt in the market. You have to go to the market, the the Genev brothers, something like that, I think. By the airship power. You go around the market and collect eggs. They're not actually eggs, but they kind of look like them. And you get a buff that increases, and when it's done, you go turn it in, and they'll give you a random loot item based on how well you did. There's also a secondary item. So the tokens you need a token to activate that. There's also a blessing, which when you turn it in, you can turn it in with a blessing, and it will give you an item.
Better stuff.
Yeah. And this is like store items. Like there's XP potions, Slayer potions, res cakes, I think. I don't remember exactly what, but it's those kind of items. Which you do get I think you generally, at least maybe always, get a better return. Like you get an item that's worth more points than the blessing, but you just don't know what you're going to get. So, but that was kind of thinking for me. It's like, just give us a blessing. Right. That'll take us to community news, and we do have the 635th Chronicle. Wait, are we on the same number? That's weird.
No,
420th Chronicle.
Right.
Because I was typing numbers. The 420th Chronicle, that sounds more right. Congratulations to Loria for winning an Old Curiosity Shop Guild Story competition. You can check that out on the forums. Lynitha shares some great art from the hardcore server experience. Yeah, that was really good art.
I
saw that. It looked good.
See that.
It's very well done. It's two characters back to back. Really, really well done. Really nice.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did see that.
Axel plays Feywild music on the guitar. He figured out how to play the theme on the guitar. So it's him playing with himself. It's like split screen. Yeah, shut it.
That's what I want to see is a video of Axel playing with himself.
So he's playing like one part in one shot, and then a different part of the theme in the other shot.
Yeah, it's good. I heard that as well.
Strimtom has your hardcore builds. He has 9 builds on YouTube. The comment for the week, whereupon the summoned frog stated blank.
Kiss me, I'm a prince, I swear.
I'm going to say send Cordovan more ideas for the comment. That's what the frog said. Let's see. Fansite news. Got a shout out for episode last week talking about the Dryad and the Demigod. DDO Stream is your first stop to find DDO on Twitch. This week, DDO PL, Voodoo, and Zersmash all get shoutouts. Also on Twitch, Strimtom builds a bowman, Nubicabra tears through hardcore, and Brackart is also feeling successful and alive. And on YouTube, Serious Game begins hardcore season 4. Ice Damon heads into Stardust, and Aldbar DDO has a guide to Ide of the Titan. They did talk about the changes on their weekly Wednesday lunchtime live stream this week as well, so you can check that out. And that kind of covers all of that stuff. D&D night on DDO Stream. Check us out Sundays, 7 p.m. Eastern on twitch.tv/DDO Stream for tabletop D&D. This week is my campaign, Oracle of War. So it should be a lot of fun. Haven't killed anyone yet. Might change.
By the way, my wife may or may not be there for that.
Okay.
PJ, she got her Johnson & Johnson COVID shot, and
congratulations.
It really knocked her to the, really threw her for a loop. So
yeah,
she may or may not be there.
There's a lot of that going around these days, which is great.
Yes.
Vaccination, good. Being sick from vaccination, sort of good.
Yeah.
I mean, it means it's working. Let's see. DDOCast news. DDOCast Splat might be on hiatus for an extended period of time. I think we're right on the cusp of the baseball season where that's going to be impeding that. So we probably won't be back for DDOCast Splat for a while. However, on the flip side, I have been streaming gaming a little bit more. I think I'm going to kind of make a token hardcore run. Maybe see if I can get the cloak, which I kind of like the look of. I'll be streaming some of that. I might stream some more playing DDO and stuff like that. So you can check us out at twitch.tv/DDOcast. I've also been streaming some other games as well, so you can check us out there too. And I'm just going to give a couple people followed in the last week, so I'll just give a shout out to Lucana, the DDO Experience, Rue the Milkman, JZ, LDDO, Jack at the Kilns, and Nighthair1. So thanks for following us. If you want to see some times when playing games, maybe more DDO, but also some other games, feel free to check us out. That'll wrap everything up. Check us out at say thanks for listening. You guys have anything you want to plug?
Not for me, no. I'm good.
No, I'm not a plugger.
So thanks, Epic and Arkat, for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. Of course, don't forget to check out the Ask the Devs. If you listen to this live, it won't be here, but for those who listen to the recorded and the published podcast, it'll be coming up here momentarily. And thanks to the devs again, Lynnabel and Cordovan and Cocomajobo for joining me for that earlier today. And thanks to Wizards of the Coast and Cybears for Wizards of the Coast for making DDO happen, along with Sanderson Games, and for Cybears for hosting the podcast. If you'd like to support the show, you can visit our website, DDOcast.com, or you can support us on Patreon, or you can follow us on Twitch or YouTube. If you have a DDO-themed webpage or you Twitch DDO and you'd like to be featured on our website, email us, DDOcast@gmail.com. We'd love to add you to our list that we have on our website. And you can also check us out at DDOcast.com for show notes, MP3s, our calendar, previous shows, and other fun stuff. If you have a comment on this episode, a question you'd like to hear us answer, a topic you'd like to hear us discuss, or you just want to say hi, email us or leave a comment. You can also find us on social media and follow us for latest cast updates at DDOcast on Twitter is the best place. So stay tuned for our Ask the Devs segment. Hey, hello, and welcome to another episode of Ask the Devs on DDOcast. Really excited to have the devs here with us today. Thanks for coming, guys. We've got, let's see, Cordovan, our community manager for SSG.
Hey, thanks for having us on.
We have Cocomajobo, associate producer.
Hello.
And Lynnabel, a systems designer.
Howdy.
And before we really jump into it, I do feel like I need to point out, Coco, you last time you were on our show, I believe you took ownership of getting the producers letter out in January.
Yeah, absolutely.
And,
that's right.
So I feel like we must give you a little public shaming for
a little
the tar and also understand, we might get into some stuff that they have the best of intentions of happening sooner and maybe slower. So, but anyways, we're here to talk about Update 49, which was in its second preview this week, and I think I heard that there was going to be another preview.
Yeah, I meant to post the usual Friday. Hey, we're having a preview next week. Yesterday, and then failed. So I'm gonna do that later today. There'll be a preview next week.
Okay, so we will be having another third preview of that next week. So that sounds pretty good. And so we're gonna talk about a few things that are in there, partly because they are verbose and technical and have some complicated stuff. But I wanted to start with something not super related to Update 49 first. And this is probably more for Cordovan. There's an opt-in and opt-out newsletter now. Could you tell us a little bit about that? What what is in this newsletter and why people might want to opt in.
Okay, so back when you initially created your DDO account, there was a checkbox that you'd like to get newsletters or not. At that time, if you checked that box, you would be added to a email list, and historically, you would maybe get weekly sales info, bi-weekly sales info. Sometimes you get special mailings about updates or big kind of sales beats and things like that. And we actually were still doing those. We even did, I believe, one or two in 2020. But the problem had been that over the years, that email newsletter list became less and less accurate because it wasn't very good at keeping track of people's changing email addresses and that sort of thing. And there has never been a way to opt in or opt out of those newsletters other than literally sending a ticket through the help system that eventually gets to my desk, and then I tell someone to add it to a list somewhere. Didn't happen very often. So, but thankfully, as part of the other work that we've been doing related to kind of infrastructure and that over the past 3 to 4 months, we've been able to completely renovate our email system. So now you can go to my account.standingstonegames.com and, enter in your credentials, make sure to do the CAPTCHA. And if you go over to your account profile, there's a box to opt in or opt out to the newsletters. And now that we have a good system in place, we intend to do more of them. So it's a great opportunity if you haven't been getting those newsletters. I know there's a bunch of people out there have been like, "Oh, I used to get them. I don't see them anymore." Maybe they're going in your spam. Maybe you changed your email address in my account or something, and it just never populated over, right? So go into myaccount.standingstonegames.com, and you can opt in or opt out of that stuff at any time you want to. And it's just going to start working, frankly. So we're going to be doing more of it here in 2021.
Nice. So update 49. We're going to kind of talk about the two big things. And the first one is bow changes.
Mm-hmm.
And this was, there's a lot of stuff going on here. Could you give us a summarization where bows were, why they needed to change, and what's happening?
So, we've wanted to do a bow combat style revamp for a long time. Steel Star has been on this mission for years now, and it's all about finding the time. And the reason why it hasn't happened before now is because fundamentally, at the core, bow combat style was in a very bad state. That made it very hard to work with, and that comes down mostly to the animation cycle. The animation cycle that Bose had previously was not in line timing wise and on the back end with basically all of the other styles, which meant that we were basically capping a certain increase of the animation speed where we were at the current end game, meaning that there was no way to increase attack speed for bows or make it scale more smoothly across the level band in the same way that other combat styles had. And so bows were stuck in this position where they attack slower than everything else, but we also really didn't want them to damage more than everything else on a per hit basis because many shot existed and made them able to burst for 1/6 of the time, basically at the start of every major combat, for an insane multiple times their normal damage. And so it was this weird balancing act where we couldn't increase their speed to get their base attacks up, and we couldn't really increase their base damage because then when they many shot, they would become this amazing horrible beast that would just obliterate any pod of monsters that they came against. And so they were stuck in this weird position, and so we needed to redo their entire animation cycle to get it up to current standards. And then from that point, we have a more smooth progression from start to finish, and it also looks better. And we could also start tinkering with the actual damage and mechanics of the style, namely changing how many shot works and making it into a new thing, which then allows us to boost the base damage and make a more consistent play style. And so now bows are pretty big, beefy damage at slower rates than, say, like a dual crossbow or a repeater. So you get these big chunks that happen more gradually, but your numbers look much beefier. And we're in like the ballpark of damage that we want to be. It's increased from where it is at live. And you've got this really cool many shot button, which has 3 charges, and you can, which come back every 12 seconds, where you get 3 quick attacks, and they all have expanded crit profiles. So you have this like this button where you just throw out 3 quick, almost usually crits, and it's I think it is a good improvement.
So it sounds like to kind of even maybe put it in a little more layman's term, you had this problem of bows, like when the player experience for bows was, for this 20-second window that many shot was active, it was awesome. And for the other, the 2 minutes that it was on timer, it was not
useless.
awesome.
Yeah. Unless you were a CC build like an Arcane Archer, with the paralyzing arrow. But otherwise, when on cooldown for many shot, bows were not very good throughout the last few years of DDO's history. And this is attempting to make the majority of your time in combat feel good, if not amazing, like it did for that tiny 20-second window with under old many shot.
And you I think you said in your post too, like the idea here is that they shouldn't do, if you were to take a bow build and shoot at something for 10 minutes, you should end up more or less with the same amount of damage over that longer period of time, just spread out more evenly.
Yeah, I don't know that 10 minutes is right, though. I think it would be a much actually shorter time than that needed.
I was just using a longer term to kind of illustrate a spreading out.
Through multiple cooldowns of old many shot, when we hit preview 1, we were a smidge above old like sustained bow TPS, and when we hit preview 2, we're like a bit higher than that with the swapping around of some crit profile stuff. So overall, on live, when U49 goes, you should have a significant, noticeable higher sustained bow TPS at cap.
So it sounds like you're happy with where it is after our preview 2. Is there kind of a, when you're testing stuff like this, what would you tell players, like how, like to get an idea of, is it working the way that you intend? What should players be looking for? Like if you hit your mark, what would the mark that you really want to hit? What should players see? What should players experience?
So we really want range styles like bows to be to feel good and gratifying when you're doing it. So we want it to feel cool to run around, shoot things with a bow, see the big number, see a boss monster and go, oh, I'm gonna burst all my many shots, and see the big numbers stream down for a bit. But in terms of like overall balance, we're aiming for bow DPS and range styles in general to be a step behind in sustained damage melees of equivalent gearing and all of that, because there's a bit more, there's survivability in not needing to be near the things, but within striking distance of that. And I think bows are roughly there, like 1/6 lower than our typical melee range.
Okay. And there's a question about, so we're changing bow animations and stuff. Is this going to impact what monsters look like? Are monster bow animations changing?
No, this is purely the player progression. In fact, when we started looking into this, every time you change player stuff, it's always like, okay, how is this going to impact hirelings? And as it turns out, we don't have a single hireling that uses a bow, so it wasn't a problem.
So
probably for the best.
Different system.
Yeah.
So any plans on adding a hireling that uses a bow?
No.
Is that one of those things that would set DDO on fire and jettison it in the sea?
No, Torque looked into it. a long time ago and was trying to get that set up and didn't have enough time, and it's on the back burner of one of those things we never quite had time to figure out.
The worst part is that I was all up and down the place that would have made that work for an unrelated change we're going to talk about later.
Not looking forward to going back into that place? Was it a deep, dark place?
I'm fairly sure that at this point I fixed 100% of the bugs with like the combat stuff. Like I think I'm done. So
we'll see next week.
Fingers crossed.
Nice. I think though it is worth pointing out that for a long time in DDO's meta, as it were, range has sometimes been really, really good, and sometimes been frankly not even a consideration, right? And so much of the meta of DDO's ranged, Bo in particular, has only focused on many shot, right? I mean, what else really have we been using all this
That's what
time?
propped up the style.
And so a lot of players who are really into their builds on that have been I'm sorry about that. They've been kind of getting used to building around this one thing, many shot, for such a long time that having a more holistic look at ranged as a gameplay system, can we make ranged more fun too, right? Is pretty significant. And I do think, as we've seen on Lemania, this is going to impact some of that meta there, right? But I suspect that the community is going to do what it does best, which is react to changes by finding even more amazing things to do, right?
Yeah.
It's definitely going to be a different feel, right? Like, I have always been someone who, like, damage boost, adrenaline, or Hunter's End, mini shot, sniper shot. Yay, big numbers!
And to be fair, I still think many shot's going to be the cornerstone of a lot of these builds, right?
But I'm mentally preparing myself for the numbers aren't going to be so astronomically crazy big. Take a breath. It's okay. The other numbers
not going to be
better.
all about going toward that, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not the one big moment. You'll still have that big moment, but ideally you're going to have a lot more diversity and opportunity throughout everything you could be doing.
And for what it's worth, after Preview 1, Steel Star made some adjustments based on player feedback, because like the argument in Preview 1 from players primarily revolved around you were talking about many shot as if it is up 1/6 the time, which based on its cooldown is absolutely correct, but it's not up 1/6 the time in combat, because when I see a monster pod, or like I run into a big room of monsters, I hit many shot and they all die in those 20 seconds, and then I move on. So it's up for the majority of that basic combat, and for bosses it's slightly different. And so what Steel Star did for Preview 2 and going forward, which I think has worked out and people liked more than the Preview 1 iteration, is instead of now being on a 12-second cooldown, you have 3 charges of it, which regenerate at 1 charge per 12 seconds. And so if you run into a room and there's a ton of monsters and you need to deal with them at this moment, you can burst out 9 quick shots, which all have expanded crit range, and like, so there is a bit of burst in how you choose to, when you choose to use all of your uses of many shot, and then you regain them slowly over time. You can spread them out like you would have been able to in Preview 1, but if the situation calls for it, you can get 9 expanded crit shots within like 6 seconds of each other.
It's also worth noting too that there will be kind of an interesting gamemanship about using those charges, right? Because if you're at max charges, you're not regenerating any charges, so you want to try to use them, but maybe you don't use them all. So,
well, it's the same thing as that's the same as if your many shot was off its cooldown on its 12-second cooldown, like from Preview 1, and it's like, well, I should use it now so that I can get the cooldown started again. Mm-hmm. It's like that's the same kind of logic, though.
Anything else you want to say about bow changes to give players an idea of what they can expect and why they should be excited?
For these bow changes, not particularly. Like we've done a lot of work trying to make sure that builds that have access to enough enhancements that deal with the bow style, so people who have ranger because they have 2 full trees will feel like they are in a good place. But we still have a bunch of places that half support bows, like War Priest, War Soul, the Paladin, Knight of the Chalice, which have like 1 tree, which increase bow DPS, and then unless you dip into another class, you don't really have anywhere to spend your enhancement points that will increase bows, and those will still be a step behind because we didn't want to juice everything so that you would not need to spend enhancement points, because coming later in the year, after we've seen the dust settle from this and figured out what anything that needs to be fixed or like any outliers, we will have a universal enhancement tree that will allow you to, even if you aren't ranger, essentially, that has its 2 bow trees, will give you another source of enhancement points to spend on bow DPS that you can complement and make other builds that are pure bow builds that aren't just rangers.
And that's the Horizon Walker.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always fun. Universal enhancement trees are kind of fun, right? You expand the build meta.
Yeah, they basically just give classes that don't have a place to spend enhancement points on a certain niche another place to spend those on, so you don't have to multi-class for it. Or if you do multi-class, you have a ton of options. It's all options. That's what universal enhancement trees are.
Oh, I thought it was another source of torturing me for I don't have enough action points to spend in all of these cool things.
The only thing I thought when I've just been kind of thinking about our conversation so far is we haven't touched on the fact that this has no real impact on crossbow users or anything like that. Just to kind of be clear, this is bows specifically, not much, right?
A couple of things, just by ripple effects, did touch crossbows. I forget what they are.
Like alacrity, range speed, right? Some of the feats.
A tiny bit, ripple effects from that, but nothing major.
And what about throwers?
The big thing with throwers is that 10k stars from Monk, which allowed Monkshers to pop their many shot and their 10k stars on cooldown and swap between shuriken and bow. Because bow many shot is a completely different thing now. 10k stars no longer puts it on cooldown, and also is only usable by shurikens. So Monkshers are changing because bows are changing. Yeah.
Well, the other big thing for Update 49 is game performance changes. And we did, I'll just kind of throw this out there too. My guild, on Wednesday, we went on Lamania. Jerry was with us. Lynnabel was kind of hanging out, chatting with us as well. And we did some raids on Lamania to kind of give this a test whirl. And that video is on our website and stuff, DDOCast.com, if you want to kind of look and kind of get a feel for that. But so we have this other big thing, game performance changes, which is pretty generically said, but it's really about the effects processing, right? So maybe have you going what are these changes? What's happening? Why are these changes happening? And what can players expect on the other side?
Well, there's a lot that's going on, which is why we wrote up a gigantic post about this. So if any of this doesn't make any sense, we put 3,000 words together to try and put together a roughly exhaustive list of what's going on and why things are changing. But in essence, right now on live, double strikes and double shots, while handled while they get to the end result in a different way, depending on if you're melee or ranged, the end result is that they are an additional full attack according to the game. They are an additional roll of damage, additional roll of sneak attack, additional crit roll, additional miss, and then all the different effects are additionally added to the thing. So you'll see a hit, and you'll see another hit underneath it, and that's the double strike or the double shot. And for double shots, we can have more than one hit, and for double strikes, they're currently capped. So game performance has been very, very prominent in our priorities right now, because we're trying very, very hard to try and get our game performance stuff under control. And one of the things that we've been doing at this point is because as we pare down DDO's generic lagginess, what we're left with are essentially every single game thing that causes lag and a big list of here's what causes lag in DDO. And we're going down that big list and we're trying to fix all those things. And sometimes these fixes are invisible. Like we just change something in the back end, we change how processing works, and players don't notice. And sometimes they're not invisible, like this one right here, which is why we wanted to take our time, go to Lamania, go on all these live streams, and just trying to explain what's happening and why. So before, like right now on live, it's the same, it's a separate hit, which is a full other gigantic thing of processing. Now it's the same double strike and the same double shot, but if you roll a double shot or a double strike, or I'm going to call it a multi-hit because it's like they both kind of do the same thing now. Depending on the amount of times you multi-hit, we now multiply all of the damage by the amount of times you've multi-hit. So before, if you did around 50 damage in your front number and around 50 damage in sneak attack, and you did like plus 10 fire damage, you would do plus 100, plus 100, plus 20 if you double strike, and plus 150, plus 150, plus 30 if there was a double, like a triple double shot, And what that means is that this drastically cuts down on the number of effects that actually go off. So in like our game, but also in every single other video game, when you apply effects or you do things to like a monster or something, those things have to process in chronological order. Because it doesn't make sense if you throw a debuff on someone, then you throw some damage on someone, the debuff happened first, so the debuff has to have gone off before the second thing happens. Otherwise, the second thing isn't going to be by the debuff, or is it going to be prevented by some buff or something. So what this means is that there's actually a bottleneck. The game can only process so many effects going off per second, and the number is very, very big. But we're at the point right now in which players are able to generate more effects than the effects queue can process over time. So over time, that amount of queue starts to build up, and that eventually prevents attacks from going off. And then eventually, when the server goes, oh my god, this instance is in trouble, oh my god, the server holding this instance is in trouble, we've got to clear that queue, it will slow down the action, which is what lag is, and try to clear that queue up as much as it can so it can free up all of those resources and continue to process the rest of the game. And like, I guess this also isn't a hardware bottleneck as well. This is like an internal check to prevent this from causing a hardware problem, because like, it's a lot better if the software recognizes this as a problem and stops it, rather than the game just filling up with memory and crashing, in which everybody would experience a lot of lag because the game would be off and there would be no more game. But to get back on track, when we're attacking the effects queue, we're looking into how fast effects can process and see if we can make improvements there. But what it comes down to is that players just have a lot of effects. They have a lot of on-hit effects, a lot of on-spellcast effects, and a lot of things that just over time, that like a standard raid group is going to overwhelm that buffer 9 times out of 10. So this change, since it condenses all of those effects and stuff like that, we're hoping to attack combat lag. We're hoping to attack the experience in which a group of raiders go into a raid and they start beating on the boss, and then performance would degrade almost immediately because they're hitting a buffer, and then the buffer has to be cleared before combat can continue. And this kind of stuff can ripple outwards. It's not just to your instance. It's every single instance that's being held by the bare metal server that's processing that part of DDO. And so it's pretty debilitating. And the sad part is that this kind of lag means that you could be in an unrelated dungeon in an unrelated instance, and because the server is in distress, it ripples outwards through that. And that's obviously a really doesn't feel very good. So we're trying to attack that at its source. We're trying to condense all of its effects down, and like, earlier reports from Lamania were a little bit of hit or miss, because Lamania itself it's not a great test environment for performance stuff, because the inclusion of the dojo just causes lag by virtue of existing and being on. But all of our internal tests, we can make a very good educated guess. Like, we're able to monitor server frames directly, which is something that players don't have access to. Like, we have internal perf logs that, like, obviously players can't sign into our servers on the back end and look at those numbers. But we were able to have a reliable reproduction of this event, in which we queued up a whole bunch of effects and watched them kick down, and we saw the server frames drop. Then we did this change, and now that caps out around 50% of the network utilization for that particular node, which is well within our green zone. That's still over 100 frames per second on the server. So that's still faster than the client goes, which is what we're trying to happen.
So ultimately, we know that this will have an impact on server strain, and we think it'll be noticeable to players, but we're not saying that this will cure all lag. We are simply saying that this will improve server performance, and we will see when it hits live how noticeable it is. I think having looked at the data, that it could be very noticeable, but we may have to go back to the drawing board after it's done if it doesn't solve everything, because it won't. But we will continue working on it. But this is our first big, giant player-facing step towards dealing with game performance.
Yeah.
When we were on,
there's a whole bunch of other... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
When we were playing around on Wednesday on the Mania, like our kind of early return was that it definitely seemed to have an improvement overall, because we were in Vision of Destruction and Killing Time, both of which have a lot of what I like to call like stand and deliver moments with a raid boss, where you just beat the crap out of it and throw as much stuff at it as you can. And those parts seemed to be a lot more improved. There were other things that happened that, like monsters spawning in larger numbers seemed to be kind of performance. So it didn't fix everything, but it certainly felt to us like initially better.
Yeah, and it's also like, if you think about it, like what we have right here in just like, let's say just Killing Time, there's the two major sources of performance problems. One is you're all hitting the same boss and the instance slows down, and that's really bad. And two is, from what people have been telling us, spawning monsters is not good for the server. Like it takes a lot of time for the monsters to get set up, and that also causes problems. But if you think about it, those are two separate problems. We're going to have to solve both eventually. You know what I mean? So it's like, we shouldn't, like, this one just happened to be first, and it's entirely likely that the mom spawning thing is not going to change gameplay at all. We're just going to find some bad setting on some monster spawn, and we'll fix it up, and it's not going to require everyone to redo their builds. Like, that one seems a little bit more on the back end than effects over time.
I think one thing that kind of stood out to me too, when in your post, is that this wasn't just like hit one raid boss. Like, you saw a similar effect when there were lots of things running around, and that was spread out.
As far as the server is concerned, it doesn't care what you're hitting. Like, it has a certain number of effects that it can process. And so though if you have a full, cap geared raid group all in the same instance, throwing out all of their full speed attacks at a pod of 30 monsters or whatever, shouldn't be 30 monsters, but like all of those need to process it on the same spot, regardless of what monster you're hitting in client. Like,
yes,
they're all
and
processing.
It's the fact that, like, those kinds of things, like a queue is first in, first out. We cannot adjust how the queue processes things. There's only one option here, it's chronologic, which means that this kind of thing is performant depending on how long that thing processes. Like, we can't just add more queues. Like, that would not make combat make sense.
And this is a symptom of being a 15-year-old game with a fast action combat that has we have faster like attack speeds and combat than I think any MMO of our age. And
everyone else didn't do this for some reason.
Well, I mean, we're the we prided ourselves at launch of like being the fast action combat, no tab targeting like MMO, and this is a symptom of that 15 years later, and we're just dealing with it.
It's both part of one of the biggest things that makes DDO what it is, right? Is that that sort of the whole group together gets this sort of action combat going that you just don't see just about anywhere else, and we're not really messing with that. So this is not going to change that. We're not. It's not going to suddenly feel like some other kind of MMO out there. I think for the average person who isn't so much interested in performance, but more how's it going to impact me, what you'll mostly see is a change in the numbers during combat. Right now, you're used to this long scroll of numbers that in most cases will actually continue beyond people stopping whatever it is they're doing.
At the high
and that's
end.
because that queue has been processing. Yeah, especially at, like, say, if you've been raiding at level 30, things like that, right?
Yeah, there's two aspects to this. There's a floaty text queue, because it's like, you think about it, DDO visually can only show so many numbers per second. That scroll happens at the same speed no matter what. So if you are generating more hits than our floaty text queue can do, those numbers kind of back up. And then eventually, basically until the corpse decays fully, you'll have a gigantic list of numbers that just fly off into nowhere. And it also means that like floaty text is like, it's a reactive number. It's supposed to tell you things about how you're doing in combat. And if you're a high-end player, this completely desyncs from what you're actually doing, because you're not seeing numbers that are happening. You're seeing numbers from several seconds ago. So the side effect of this is, since there are more numbers, but those numbers are bigger, the floating text is actually what you're currently hitting, which is pretty cool.
It feels more immediate is
Yeah.
probably the short way I could say this. When I was on Lamania, for example, you do one hit and it felt really spot on and consistently over time like that. So when you would stop hitting or stop doing whatever, it would immediately be reflected in the number queue that you're seeing above, in a way that DDO, has been in the past and is, even prior to this change, still somewhat existed, but would often be one of the first casualties of a fairly active combat.
So there was a couple of changes. I know some of these have been answered, but I want to make sure we kind of talk about them as we're talking about this and kind of getting understanding what's going on here. How do these changes interact with adrenaline, Hunt's End kind of stuff?
Well, this is a very, very blanket solution that in the code changes how combat is processed. So then what we had to do after this, and after our first preview with this change, was go back and look and see how did some character abilities actually shake out. The biggest outlier here was Adrenaline and Hunt's End and how they interacted with this. So we had to actually make gameplay changes to those. And before you freak out, hear me out. We're going to be toning down the damage percentage of Adrenaline and Hunt's End to a lesser degree, but we're going to be lowering the cooldown of Hunt's End and increasing the recharge rate of Adrenaline. So you're going to be regaining Adrenaline charges on every Vorpal, not just a third of the time on Vorpal, and the actual damage is going to be down to 200%. So you're going to be gaining charges more than twice as fast, but you're going to be doing less spike damage with them because it interacts with our spike damage from the double strike in a way that...
Yeah, and to be clear, when we say you're going to be doing less spike damage, we mean than you were on Preview 1, which was significantly more spike damage than you had been doing on Live.
Yes, those are two different multiplicative channels, so it would originally have been 500% of 500% of your base number times their crit. So people are hitting for over 1 million, and at a certain point, we're like, okay, we should probably go in and change those abilities so they work a little bit better with this new system. And so if we think about damage over time, this is toning back down the increase of the spike damage, so it's less spike damage than Preview 1, but still more than you are on Live. But we're compensating for that by making it more reliable to recharge charges or to recharge that ability.
I mean, I'd like to do 1 million damage. That sounds fun.
Go back in time to Preview 1 and press all those buttons in the right order, and it'll give you 1 million. We're also making a few changes to... this is something I did mention in my really long explanation. Part of these double strike condensing changes also impact different styles differently. For example, if you are a dual crossbow, you're still going to be seeing 2 numbers because we're firing 2 bolts. Like you have 1-2 shots and it's going to go 1-2. If you've got a repeater, it'll go 1-2-3 because those aren't double strikes, or those aren't double shots. Those are additional projectiles that the game is throwing at you, and they're going to retain their 1/2 or 1/3 double shot penalty. So that works the same as right now. Offhand strikes, rather than being added up into just one hit, are still going to be rolled with your offhand strike chance. So you hit with your main hand, you have your offhand strike chance. If hit with your offhand, that will still roll its own separate damage, its own separate effects. So if you're a 2-weapon, you have 2 different things. But we've removed the idea of offhand double strike chance from the game. Now it just takes 50% of your double strike, and that's your offhand double strike chance. And the reason we did this is because offhand double strike is a stat that's in 6 total places in the entire game, one of which isn't even used anymore because it's from the old benefit system. And having 2 different stats that only offhands can use is a little bit more crunchy. Like, strike through is 1 stat, but it used to be glancing blow damage and glancing blow proc chance. Now it's just strike through. It's only 1 stat that two-handed fighting has to think about. And kind of the same thing's happening here. If you've got a dual wielder, you care about offhand strike chance, and that's your 1 cool stat that you have to care about.
And in the service of this, it's reducing total number of attacks on the server, which is the goal.
Yeah, well, it's like this is kind of a net buff for everybody, although it's less of a net buff for Tempest. Anyway, so since like we were taking offhand double strike chance out of the game, which means that some things are effectively that we're losing stats that they gave before. So we're going to be adjusting the ASMR Scourge Past Life and the Tempest Capstone. We're going to add some sauce on there because they're losing something that was relatively unique to them. And I think in the greater good, I think it's better for the game if your offhand double strike chance isn't limited to just that Past Life and just the Tempest tree, and also the Stunning Knife Fighter. Like that doesn't necessarily seem like something that should be locked to just basically one class. But we shouldn't also just take something away from Tempest without giving something in return. Same with the Past Life. So we're going to be adding some sauce there, try and re-incentivize that, because what we don't want to do is take away Tempest's niche. We just want to help other people out with this.
There's kind of an interesting side effect of taking away the offhand double strike too and tying into double strike. Because right now, if you get 100% double strike, if you get more than that, it doesn't do you anything. But if your offhand is 50% of that, if you get your main hand double hand strike to say 150, then your offhand would still be getting benefit from that, right?
Yeah, right now that's how it is rolling into Preview 3. I could easily cap this at 50%. Like that's a really simple like one line of code. I could put that in there. And I am not 100% sure whether or not that's a good idea, because part of me thinks that it is cool that if you're a dual wielder, you could be focusing on double strike all the way up to 200%. You know what I mean? I think that's a very interesting. It means that like if you're a dual wielder, you focus on different stats. Where other characters, they'd stop at 100%. If you're a dual wielder, your build is going to be different, and I think that's really cool. But part of me is like, you're kind of buffing everybody's DPS by like 100% there. Maybe you're slow that roll for a little bit.
I mean, that's if they can get the double strike. Yeah, the question is whether or not the balance concerns overwhelm the fun, interesting,
Sure.
build niches, which is the point of DDO in a lot of ways. Like finding new, cool, weird systems interactions to make an interesting build. Like,
yeah. So I'm personally torn. My plan is to just try and get a feel of it from Preview 3, and worst case scenario, we can just change it again after the patch. Like if it turns out this is a disaster, like you know what I mean, like we'll figure something out. But
so there are a couple other things that I wanted to kind of talk about how it interacts with. First off, you're talking about offhand strikes, so. Right, so what you're saying is that if you're 2 up and fighting, you'll still get 2 hits, right?
Yes.
It's not that's not the offhand is not being condensed into the main hand, so you'll still have all of those that will still proc effects and stuff.
Yep.
So kind of with that too, how does this interact with on hit effects that don't have a damage number?
Right now, it just doesn't. Like that's kind of what we've settled on. Like this is a pretty big shift in the meta, and people have definitely let us know. But when it comes to doubling damage or doubling ki on hit or doubling your vampirism or your fists of light or stuff like that, or sneak attack, any number of things that have a number, it's a very easy trade for us to make. We say, hey, there are less hits, but we're modifying the intensity. You hit for damage less often, but you're doing the same amount of damage over time because we're multiplying that out. When it comes to something like an on-hit debuff, we don't actually have an analog to increase the intensity of. Like we can't just jump in and make that one stack of a stackable debuff do more magnitude. We can't jump in and just increase the duration of that one stack. There's not a really good solution here. And we were saying we'll increase the stack size. And like, okay, then what about things that don't have a stack count? You know what I mean? Like, what about like ooze? You know what I mean? And then like, what we want to avoid is a situation in which we feel compelled to go through every single debuff in the entire game and retrofit it with this new system to be the exact same magnitude. Because then we have the same number of on-hit effects proccing as we did before, and we're back into the effects queue. And then we've just changed all the meta and did this gigantic month's worth of work, and we're in exactly the same performance bucket that we were before. Like, that's kind of why we wanted to go to Lamani with this. Is like, guess it's going to be a really big change. Like, this is going to be pretty huge. And now, granted, I think this does really interesting things to the meta that are actually really good. For example, cementing 2-weapon fighting as the debuff for melee, I think that's phenomenal. I think because like a lot of these debuffs people care about, like Ash and stuff like Ash and Dust and stuff like that, putting those back into the caster wheelhouse because they can actually do like magic missile and stuff like that and stack that up real fast. That's still less performant like degradation wise than like a melee hitting 1,000 times a second. So like putting the debuffers role back into 2-weapon fighting, pushing it more towards casters, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. I think that's a very interesting place for the meta to go with this.
The main point here is that like we went into this as a global change in order to solve a problem that was clear and present and seemed to be the number one community concern of server performance and lag. And in order to do something of that magnitude, there are going to be some changes. Like, this is not a net zero change on the meta. Like, we have no illusions of that.
Yeah.
But it is in service of a greater goal, and we think that there are some positive benefits even in the meta, and some interesting changes and differences that you're going to have to explore. Like,
I'm at least encouraged. Like, when the write-up you guys did was fantastic. I think about the third time reading through it, I started to pick up what was happening. And I even joked with Lynnabel on Wednesday. You gave we were kind of talking about it, and the answer you gave was very technical.
We're talking about prop chance.
Yeah, I think so. But
yes.
like one of the things that I think it's helping me kind of understand is like if there's a number involved, it's going to multiply by however many hits you get. So that number or that the damage should be more or less the same. And there may even be some kind of fringy weird things of, if you're fighting something that has damage reduction, you may actually come out ahead because more of your damage is getting past the damage reduction as opposed to splitting it off. So there's some weird things happening there, but the part where we're going to feel as players a loss, I think, is those non-damage effects. Although when I first read it, I was like, okay, so my monk who can throw a stunning fist and get like up to 4 hits is going to go down to 1. No, it's down to 2 because there's the offhand thing. But there is going to be a change there, and I think that's where that's the part where we're going to have to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I unlike damage, which we can directly go into its intensity and we can directly make that mathematical trade. Non-damaging procs or debuffs do not have an analog that we could easily go into. And we have a variety of smaller solutions for different aspects of those, but we don't have an all-in-one make all the procs better that would adequately change this in a way that would make sense or would be just as compelling for the players.
Well, if the point is to remove the number of effects applying, removing effects and then adding them back in is counterproductive.
That's about where we ended up, in which we could effectively put ourselves back in the same situation we're in right now. And I think like lag is such a big concern for us. Like we would rather just wait and see how this goes through, and then if certain styles or certain build needs help, we can jump in another way. We can give them something that they need.
Some other things I wanted to talk about how they interact here. Effects that hit players. Say the monk healing curse. Or vampirism, like these kind of effects.
Those are the monk healing curse is the only on enemy reflective on hit thing in the entire game that's a benefit. Everyone else is a negative. So that one just is gonna need. I hit that one with a bat and it figured itself out, no problem. Yes. So how this works, not to get too technical here, is when DDO goes into the let's do your damage part of it. As part of it, it determines, hey, did you hit or did you not hit? Because like obviously we don't want to do the damage on a miss, you know what I mean? And then if you hit, we're going to roll some damage, we're going to add your sneak, we're going to do the crit, stuff like that. And then we're going to trigger 2 different effect categories. We're going to trigger your on-hit effect categories. And then if you're in the crit flow, we're going to trigger your on-crit. And then we're going to trigger your reflective on hit categories, or reflective on miss if you've missed and stuff like that. And so what that means is that effects that when you punch, are doubled, because through that flow we can just pipe in the number of times you've hit and it multiplies it out. If you punch and you're healed, that's still triggered in the same place. We pipe the same number in and it just goes back to you this time, and it's doubled. So if you heal 1 damage on each hit with this change, you double strike, you'll heal 2.
Is that also true of key generation?
Yes. That's one of the bugs that was fixed from Preview 2 into the next one next week, as well as Sneak Dice. I accidentally multiplied a different number by 2, and then I multiplied Sneak Dice by 0 in a wrong place, and now they just both multiply by the right number, and we're not going to talk about that. So Sneak Dice works now. It should just be a direct numerical increase, and like all of your on-hit effects, whether they come from a weapon, like literally like flaming 3d6, you double. If it's like on you, like I feel like a Tempest with the lightning stuff should double no problem. Eldritch Knight, anything from the legendary feats, anything that shows up in that one line or shows up on you, doubles.
So any floating text we see should double.
Yes. Includes stat damage as well. That is technically damage.
Oh, fun. And then the other thing I wanted to ask about is, how does this change how monsters hit us, if at all?
I believe monsters double strike by querying their own double strike chance in scripts. So that's a really good question. Actually, I don't know. I think they just... I'm thinking about this. I don't think monsters double strike. I think that certain attacks have a double hit that to the player looks like a double strike, but is actually a double hit. I don't think that stat actually works on a monster.
I believe that is the case, yes.
Yeah, like because like I looked for every single thing in the entirety of the scripts folder that had the double strike thing, and it was only on players.
So we should not expect monsters to hit twice as hard.
That's correct. Monsters don't have that stat, and their scripts fake a double strike.
Monsters are set up with their their animations determine whether an attack is a single hit or a double hit. And some of those are erroneously double hits, as players are probably well aware, but there's hundreds of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And what we saw on really both previews now on Lamani is it doesn't look or feel any different really in terms of how monsters are hitting you. It all seems to be basically unchanged.
Well, what we're saying is that if you ever get hit and you see those floaty text icons with the swords, please tell us immediately. Just let us know.
It's
a sign the monsters are becoming sentient. We've baked it into the engine. We want to make sure that we catch it ahead of time.
Yeah.
So that kind of wraps up what we're going to talk about Update 49. If you guys have some time, maybe we talk a little bit about a couple other things really quick.
Sure.
Unless there's anything else you want to say about the game performance on the way out. I think it bears mentioning...
No, but I could say related... Go ahead.
It bears mentioning what Coco said at the beginning. I think we started talking about this too. Like, this is not going to fix all server performance issues. Right, so keep that in mind.
Here's hope.
Fingers crossed.
I was just going to add that related to Update 49, we do have a new adventure pack that'll be coming out free to VIPs and available in the store. And then also Update 49 has some other stuff too that you can see.
There's named loot, and also Lynn revamped the loot from the old Lord's March Plaza quests as well in U49.
Oh yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, that was really fun.
And our target date for Update 49 is not next week, but potentially the weekend.
Yeah, we'll see.
So the other thing I was going to ask you about, hey, Hardcore Season 4 is out. It's in the wild. How's it going? Have you learned anything? Like, the past Hardcore seasons, there's been some things that have kind of jumped out. What's it look like from your end? Are mimics winning?
Ooh, that's a good question. Are mimics winning? I like that question.
I mean, this season is certainly like into like our metrics wise, it's doing great. A lot of people are playing, and that's great. Just in case you guys weren't aware, just like last season, this season is open to everyone. You do not have to be VIP. You can be free to play. You can be premium. You can be VIP. So feel free to get in there and give it a try. It's a really, really fun experience. This season, by virtue of the mimics and from the new champions, is a lot more difficult than previous seasons. We really really put the hardcore back in hardcore in a way that I think players are really appreciating. It feels like they're rising to the challenge in a way that we were really hoping for. It really seems like the crowd that really enjoys hardcore, like what they're looking for, like that level of challenge. Obviously, you could still do some refinements and stuff like that, but it seems like people are really enjoying it. Yeah.
I think the answer is they're not winning, but the players certainly aren't stomping them.
They're not losing either.
They're not losing either. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we went into season 3, Saving Grace, with the idea that we wanted to see what a softer version of a permadeath server, a hardcore server, would do, and then open the floodgates to everyone instead of just VIPs, with the extra lives and the no special new challenges. And then we wanted to, every hardcore season we want to feel distinctly different. And so coming from that, we wanted to flip the script and do a bunch of new crazy champion types that have awful, the twists that you're not expecting. So you have to like learn a new thing when you're going. And almost as like an offhand thing, we were like, oh, we could also turn Mimic Festival on. That'd be fun. And then it opened up and everyone was like, mimics! Oh my God, there's mimics everywhere! And so like, we'll get into like in a couple weeks from now. It's only been open for a week, like the actual player stats and lives and like run times and stuff like that. But from a population perspective, people seem really into it, and so I'm very happy with that.
I definitely got a couple messages shortly after hardcore opened that were some combination of "it's your fault," "there's mimics on hardcore." Like, yes, I will happily accept this.
The timing of it being like right, I think it was March 31st we opened up, right? So everyone is going on. It was April 1st, and they were like, "Aren't they just pulling our leg here? Is this really what's happening?" But it was like, but the whole hardcore season kind of focuses on the Dalkir and stuff as well, so it makes perfect sense to have all these mimics around as well.
I'm pro mimic. I've said on the show it'd be fun to do, and I think Jerry and I even talked about it offline at some point. So it was a lot of fun.
DDO has a gigantic variety of different settings and groups of characters, so we have a big list of like who we want to do next. You know what I mean? And it's like it's really fun. Like the hardcore lets us play a bit of a meta game in a way that our other events don't. I think it's really excellent. Like,
I will say I am going to continue to push for all of the variety of champions to make their way onto live.
We were actually
they're a lot of fun.
Here's a pitch for an event, okay? The Champion Hunter week becomes like a planar chaos thing. You know what I mean? Well, while the Champion Hunter week is on, we each pick one of the other planes of champions.
Yeah, we're building up a roster of different suites of champion types, which we have the ability to turn on in any world, and we just haven't yet gotten to the point where we're like planning to do that in any way. But we now have 3 different suites of champion types, and it would be a shame if we only use them for those hardcore seasons, and there's internal talk about how we want to use them going forward.
I agree. It would be a terrible shame. They're lots of fun. And then the other thing I was going to just kind of throw out, hey, the Festival of Travelers back. I think it's been a while. We've seen some other events get a facelift. Is this something that the team is looking at, or is this just a, hey, we're going to turn it on kind of a thing?
I have some ideas.
Yeah, we've had lots of ideas. Ultimately, this was people have been asking for the Festival of the Traveler. It really has been a long time since it got back, and hey, we're happen to be filling out the calendar here for around the spring time frame, and so let's just do it. Is literally really why it's here. People wanted it. It made sense to just bring it out because it had been too long.
It's still a functional event.
Yeah,
like,
it's
so
still
there
a
was
functional
no harm
event.
in turning it on.
Yep. And with the blessing of the Traveler, which is generally the bit that you need to get from the store, it is still giving out things like res cakes and that as well. Tolero had taken a look at the rewards table to make sure that it was still the case that basically it always returns something of equal or greater value to what you get put into it in terms of raw DDO point spend and things like that, right? So functionally it was okay to still release it. That said, we totally understand the loot kind of sucks and the rewards kind of stink, and we totally need to do something about that. But we just have not really ever had the opportunity to go back and revisit it. And this time it's back, mostly because people want it back, and it's fun, and it doesn't entirely suck. You still get some fun, cool stuff, and you can get res cakes and things like that. So you can still get some cool stuff. But we recognize that the general tier of the rewards for the Festival of the Traveler are not up to 2021 standards.
Here's my terrible pitch for an event that would replace it.
Sure you want to do this live?
Yes. So, you know how the Snow Peaks Festival was like kind of a reimagining of the winter events in which you had to find these cool, like the champions, you know what I mean? What if, hear me out, to collect the like event tokens you needed to like turn in for stuff for this event, they're found randomly in all breakables in the entire game. Like literally in a breakable break, so there's a percentage chance that like an egg falls out. You know what I mean?
Could be interesting.
That's my whole pitch. That's the end of the event. That's the end of my pitch. That's about as far as I've got.
What quests have an absurd amount of breakables?
There's Stop Hazardil Shipment, and we just turn that off. Like we just lock the quest or something. I don't know.
No, I mean, we just make it not spawn in those specific entities. Like,
So here we go. When we ever release Isle of Dread, each one has a chance. We'll take a bit from the Mimic Festival. Each one has a chance to spawn an egg, and the egg can crack open and spawn a little dinosaur. And then, so every time you hit a breakable, you could be faced with a dinosaur or something like that.
My head went directly to like dinosaur oatmeal. It was like, never mind. You know what I'm talking about?
I do.
That was the thing.
I'm just saying that Stormreach is a lot like Jurassic Park, and you know those dinosaurs aren't staying on the island. Let's just be real here.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Coco and Cordovan and Lynnabel, for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Anything else you want to tease on the way out? I think we kind of covered a lot of stuff, but we'll just kind of throw out a quick anything you want to plug or send people to. Go to Lemania next week.
Yes.
Yeah, Tuesday to Thursday, the usual.
Will there be a dev event on the Wednesday again?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Which I think last time was at 8 Eastern.
Yeah, 8 to 10 Eastern is when those typically take place. And every time we do a third preview, it is less populated than the previous two before it. So if you go to that dev event, you might have my rapt solo attention. We'll find out.
Jerry, anything else you want to throw out on the way out?
Not really. I can't think of anything too much. No, I think we pretty well covered it.
Great. Well, thanks for watching, and may all of your attack rolls be crits, all of your chest level appropriate, have fun, and don't forget to gather for buffs.